Man, after years of denials, Hunter Biden finally acknowledged Joe Biden was the big guy in the $5 million China deal. At long last, first son Hunter Biden affirmed during his Wednesday impeachment inquiry deposition that his father, Joe, was the big guy, referenced in an email about a business deal with a Chinese state-linked energy firm that yielded millions for Biden family members and other associates more than 3 years after the Post broke the story, but rejected the notion the president was ever penciled in for a 10% stake. And I'd like to point out that makes literally no sense because the email says 10% for the big guy. And so if the big guy is Joe Biden, what are you talking about? The deposition represents the first time the 54-year-old Hunter has admitted that his former business partners, James Gilliar, was referring to Joe Biden when he raised the prospect on May 13th, 2017, of the first son holding a 10% stake in the lucrative joint venture involving CEFC China Energy for the big guy. Okay. Now, not that I think any criminal action will actually, any action will be taken against them for their criminal activities, but this is a pretty bold thing to admit. Okay, let me just explain. It is very illegal for a third party to take on assets of that size to shield ownership for another individual. I'm sure the IRS would like to have a word with Mr. Hunter Biden about this. But there you go. This is it. The dam has broken. What we all knew is now there written in, I would say, digital ink, we'll call it that, on the paper. Hunter Biden testified. They released the testimony. This is it. Okay, now what? Now what happens? What do we do?
I'm not thinking a lot, to be honest, and that's just me being cynical. I am glad that we have the record. I think ultimately that is a good thing. We want these facts to come out. It is also nice, in my opinion, because Hunter Biden threw such a hysterical fit about having to comply with any sort of subpoena from Congress or anything else. You remember he held that press conference on one of the days, or another time, like mid-congressional hearing where he was supposed to be there. They were voting to hold him in contempt. He storms in and crosses his arms with his lawyers. I am tired of Hunter Biden's hysterics, and I am tired of the lies in the Biden family. However, I just don't think that we'll see the kind of justice we would like. We're not going to see him behind bars. Maybe, or at least not during this administration.
Right. Because Biden controls the DOJ, right? So they're not going to open an investigation into Hunter Biden because, they're totally in bed with the Biden regime and what they're doing. But again, I think as Hannah said, this is something that the American people, at least conservatives, have known and covered for a long time, right? We've known that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, when Joe Biden was VP, were going around the world, ripping off the American people, selling out American interests, and lining their own pockets. So this is not surprising, I think, to at least conservative Americans, but this is a message that we need to get out more to those independent voters, because I think you saw in 2020 a lot of the Hunter Biden stories obviously were suppressed. You weren't allowed to talk about the laptop on Twitter. We weren't allowed to talk about the dirty business dealings. So it's important to get those messages out there, because ultimately the American people want, a government that doesn't sell them out, that isn't corrupt. So we need to make sure that people are aware of what Hunter and Joe have done for decades in this city.
I withdraw my apology for dead naming Kingsley, who just called me Hannah instead of Hannah Claire.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. It's just payback. It's vengeance.
We're even.
Hannah Claire looked at me
even.
and gave me a look as soon as she said Hannah.
We're even.
You had a good thought, so I didn't want to interrupt you. But yeah, we're even, and now you're married again.
There we go.
You were going to say something bad about the Bidens?
I think I was, actually. I have questions that may lead to the uncovering of badness. How did this come out in the testimony? Was it out of context, or was he like, oh no, that text about the big guy?
Asked directly about it. There's an email, and his explanation is, Joe Biden's out of office. Maybe we'll be able to get him involved, the first son said. Remember, again, it's that Joe Biden, for the first time in 40 years, is not an elected official and is not seeking office. And so James is probably like, wow, wouldn't it be great if a former vice president could be in our business together? You see, here's the important thing. The issue about 10% for the big guy, instantly, first order thinker liberals are going to be like, oh, he wasn't even in office. The argument always was, Joe Biden used his office to get his family members lucrative deals. And when you got the circumstantial evidence of, here's an email showing they were trying to work deals and shield this deal, 10% for the big guy held by the son, which is, I'm pretty sure, not legal to do. I think that's fairly illegal, probably violates a ton of laws. Okay, so the question then becomes, when you look at Politico's reporting on what they called Biden Inc., where the fortunes of the Biden family tracked alongside Joe Biden's political career, we now have evidence, admission, Joe Biden was the big guy for whom they were holding assets for in these business dealings internationally. Just so happens this one time, this occurred when he was not in office, but that's not the point. The point is he was absolutely involved in their business dealings. Hunter kept saying he wasn't involved at all. Never involved. And now he's like, well, yeah, of course we wanted him to be involved.
Right. And they're saying it's the first time in 40 years, meaning when he was no longer vice president. But at that time, the Biden family was having conversations about a potential run for presidency. He was never intending to stay out of politics, move to the private sector or Ukraine.
Well, he's
or
never
whatever.
had a private sector job.
No, he never has. And so it is interesting that they're saying, oh, well, technically he's not holding office, so this would be a good time, except that his intention was always to seek the presidency. It's not a guarantee, but he was intending to hold office again. He wasn't intending to give up the private sector money he was trying to cultivate.
I think they want him impeached. I think the Democrats,
want to get rid of him.
Yeah, they're like, we don't have an exit strategy for Biden. We need the Republicans to impeach him and convict him. And it would be really funny if, honestly, you know what would happen? If the Republicans do impeach Joe Biden, I believe there's a strong possibility he does get convicted. You know why? Israel-Palestine. You're going to get a bunch of Democrats putting serious pressure on the senators, which will give them an excuse to say, without getting into the issue, Biden has seriously mishandled this. And it can go either way. It can be a senator saying something like, Biden's capitulation to the far left in defense of Hamas is we can't accept this. And then they'd say these revelations show this man is not fit to be president. And then you might get like a Bernie Sanders saying like Joe Biden's support for Israel. The Democrats are fractured on this one. I just think there's a strong possibility because of the Israel-Palestine stuff. Look, Joe Biden got 100,000 uncommitted votes in Michigan. And these were Democrats that if it came down to an impeachment in the House and then it went to a trial in the Senate, 67 senators need to vote him out. I think it's a strong possibility it happens. In fact, it may be the Republicans would have to decide they would do it. And the Democrats are going to be like, oh, geez, well, I guess we have to impeach and convict Joe Biden. And he's their pariah. You look at 2020 and the quote from Barack Obama, Joe, you don't have to do this. And what was one of the theories? That Joe Biden was never intended to actually go beyond the first term. He was going to step in as an old man who was basically retired, be the pariah who takes all the arrows in the back as he guts all the good things Trump did to re-empower the deep state. And then he can leave in disgrace, but his life is basically over anyway, paving the way for the younger generation they'll try and shove in through the uniparty to step up and say, yeah, Joe Biden was bad. We're going to fix it.
Yeah, they did sort of present him as I remember at some points during his campaign saying like, he was the last of this old guard of Democrats, meaning specifically white men. And especially during the DNC, the convention a couple of years ago, I remember specifically it brought out all of his granddaughters, but he does have, at that time he had one, now he has two grandsons, and they left him in the background because they were like, no, he's for women and he's progressive and he's going to pick Kamala and it's going to be great and he's just going to do it for 4 years, and then he's going to leave and turn it over to the new face of the Democratic Party. And that's ultimately not the case. He wants to stay in power. He is power hungry, or at least someone, maybe Jill, someone there wants him to stay in office. But I think he is a huge problem for the DNC because now they have someone they don't actually want there, and there's no real way to navigate out of it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Obama too. Obama famously said this was, a headline during the 2020 campaign. He said, don't underestimate Joe's ability to F things up. So I think that, Democrat strategists for years have known that Joe Biden is a liability because of the dirty dealings. I think, they've all been aware of that for a long time, but also because he's just, a buffoon. Mm-hmm. So I think they're fed up with him for sure. I'm not totally convinced that House Republicans would impeach him. They could barely impeach Mayorkas, which I think was disgraceful. But, time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah. And also, I don't think the DNC wants to impeach Joe because, again, then they have
the RNC?
Well, I don't know that the RNC wants to because a Biden-Trump lineup is good for them. But I don't think the DNC wants to impeach Biden because they know Kamala Harris doesn't have it. She couldn't carry 4 years. She couldn't get reelected. And so, actually, everyone is looking at it like, for the RNC, it's good if Biden stays in. He's going to stumble around on stage. He's not polling that well. He's losing voters. Even, there's another, you mentioned the uncommitted vote in Michigan. There's another movement to do that in Colorado. And so really the DNC is the one who's hurt the most by this because they can't clearly exit this trap they set for themselves.
Harry Lawrence is a good super chat. He says it'll be like Nixon 2.0. Biden will get impeached, resign. Kamala will pardon him and Hunter.
I don't know. I mean, but then does Kamala run in his place?
No, I think she says, I'm not here to run for re-election. I'm here to serve in my official capacity to move this country forward. And that allows her to say, like, I defer to, and then insert whoever else. Newsom.
Hillary Clinton would be raising her hand at the back.
She's already like elbowed her way to the front.
No, she'd be flying down on her broomstick, landing on the stage and being like, I'm ready. And then, there you go.
Kamala Harris says,
think
I'm
you have
not
to
here
worry-
for a long time. I'm here for a good time. And then just like leaves everything behind, pushes off the coast.
Yeah. And then I think that's their strategy. And everybody acts like Kamala Harris needs some kind of like incentive to leave. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like these people are going to just do what they're told to do. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think she also looks like she's having a terrible time. I mean, she used to be like a pretty accomplished attorney, and now every speech she gives, it's just total word salad. Like, I think she's having some sort of freak out or something. I don't know what's going on with her.
Maybe she's not allowed to have a better speechwriter than Biden, because Biden can't get his speeches out anyway. So she seems more articulate. She has to be worse than him because she's second fiddle.
This is actually a good point. The reason she sounds like a moron might be intentional because they were like, you cannot be giving speeches that outshine Joe Biden, and Joe Biden can't give speeches.
Yeah.
So you need to just tone it down to like a third grade level so that you never say anything.
That's DIE in practice. That's equality of outcome. They're going to make sure they kneecap all the others so that they are as good as the crappy one.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.